You mean to tell me you can't even read it?
His voice cut through the conference room like a whip, smooth, polished, and soaked in disbelief. The billionaire, Victor Hale, leaned back in his leather chair, his cufflinks catching the sterile light of the boardroom. Around him, his executives laughed in restrained, obedient ripples, the kind of laughter that didn't reach their eyes. Across the long table stood a young woman in a modest navy dress, clutching a folder to her chest. Her name was Ilara Quinn, the freelance translator hired on a one-week contract to decode a rare 14th century document his company had purchased in an auction for $2 million. Victor's smirk deepened. They said you were the best. But it's been 3 hours, Miss Quinn, and all you've done is stare at it like it's some kind of sacred relic. Ilara didn't answer. She had been warned about Victor, the youngest self-made billionaire in the tech sector, a man whose arrogance was as legendary as his intellect. But she hadn't expected this. The manuscript on the table wasn't ordinary. Its parchment shimmered faintly under the LED lights, the ink shifting color with each tilt of the page, a phenomenon no chemical analysis had been able to explain. "I'm not staring," she said quietly. "I'm reading." That earned another burst of laughter. Victor's jaw flexed in feigned amusement. Reading? In what language exactly? The museum experts couldn't even identify the script. Ilara looked up at him. Her eyes were calm, unsettlingly so. That's because it's not a language you can identify. It's pre-verbal symbology, written before structured linguistics existed. It's closer to thought than to speech. For the first time, the laughter faltered. Victor's brow creased. Closer to thought? Yes, she said simply. It engages a part of the brain that modern languages don't, the corpus callosum, the bridge between hemispheres. This text doesn't just speak to you, it activates you. There was a brief, uncomfortable silence. Victor tapped a finger against the table. Fascinating. So you're telling me this medieval doodle can activate my brain? His tone dripped with mockery. All right then, Miss Quinn, translate this, and my fortune is yours. The words hung in the air, arrogant and dismissive, a challenge he thought impossible. Ilara's eyes flicked toward the parchment. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she drew a slow, measured breath, her fingers trembling slightly as they traced the ancient curves of the ink. The symbols pulsed faintly beneath her touch, like veins remembering a heartbeat. Her voice, when it came, was low and deliberate. "You shouldn't have said that." Victor raised a brow. "Why not?" "Because you don't know what you've wagered." The boardroom erupted in amused whispers, but beneath their laughter, Victor felt something. Unfamiliar, a thin, cold thread of unease. He waved a hand. "Proceed, translator. Let's see this miracle language of yours." Ilara nodded once and began. Her translation didn't sound like words at first. It was closer to resonance, syllables drawn from deep within the diaphragm, vibrating in frequencies that seemed to hum against the glass walls. The executives shifted in discomfort. One man rubbed at his temple. Another's smartwatch flickered and went dark. Victor frowned. Enough with the theatrics. But he stopped. Because something shifted. The room felt heavier. The temperature dropped by a few degrees, and the faint hum of the building's HVAC system slowed, as if the air itself were listening. The ink on the parchment flared with a dull golden glow. Ilara's voice grew steadier, the cadence hypnotic, like an invocation pulled from the marrow of time itself. And then, silence. The parchment dimmed. The air thickened. Victor blinked, suddenly aware that everyone around him was staring not at Ilara, but at him. He frowned. "What?" One of his executives pointed at his reflection in the glass wall. Victor turned and froze. The edges of his reflection were distorted. The glass rippled faintly, bending around him as though the light refused to settle. For a moment, he thought it was a trick of the eye, until he looked down at his hands. Tiny, almost imperceptible tremors ran through his fingers. His pulse quickened, his breathing shallowed. He felt something. Not pain exactly, but awareness, like the language had pressed against the inside of his mind. He stepped back. "What did you do?" Ilara looked up, calm as ever. "I translated it. You asked me to." "I said translate it, not—" He stopped again, clutching the edge of the table. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. For a brief, horrifying second, he saw something. A flicker of symbols beneath his skin, like invisible tattoos glimmering under his veins. The sensation passed, but the dread remained. Alara tilted her head. You're feeling it, aren't you? The resonance in your nervous system. The text doesn't just carry meaning, it carries instruction. It activates mirror neurons, limbic resonance, and the precuneus, the region responsible for self-perception. In other words, Mr. Hale, it's teaching your brain to see itself. Victor's jaw tightened. That's impossible. She smiled faintly. So is everything until it happens. For the first time, Victor's composure cracked. He straightened, glaring down at her. Enough. You've had your fun. Whatever trick this is, but she interrupted softly. It's no trick. It's translation in its original form, thought into matter. You just never believed language could change you. The words hit harder than he expected. He opened his mouth to retort, but before he could, Alara folded the parchment neatly, placed it back in the folder, and looked him in the eye. Your fortune, she said, wasn't the wager. You were. That was the moment the laughter stopped completely. Even the hum of the building seemed to bow to silence. For the first time in his life, Victor Hale, the man who bought countries' debt portfolios for sport, couldn't find anything to say. Because deep down, beneath the disbelief and the rage, something had shifted inside him. A flicker of recognition, a whisper in a language he hadn't known existed, telling him that what she'd read wasn't meant for him at all. It was meant through him. Victor Hale didn't sleep that night. He told himself it was because of anger, that he couldn't stand being made a fool of in front of his board. But beneath that rationalization throbbed something more insidious, fear. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the symbols again, not written on parchment, but burning faintly behind his eyelids, rearranging themselves in fluid geometries. His pulse raced each time one line curved into another, forming shapes that seemed almost aware of him. He woke before dawn, drenched in sweat, clutching the bedsheet like a lifeline. "This is ridiculous," he muttered aloud. "I'm fine. It's psychosomatic." But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. At precisely 9:00 a.m., Victor stormed into his office at Hale Dynamics, the top floor of a skyscraper that bore his name in steel and glass. The city sprawled beneath him, his empire, his reflection made concrete. He had built everything from nothing. Patented neuro-interface technology, military AI contracts, global logistics algorithms. He owned the future. So how had one woman, one translator, managed to rattle him to his core? She was a nobody, a freelancer from nowhere. Her credentials checked out, degrees in comparative linguistics, a short teaching stint at the University of Cambridge, several obscure publications in semiotics. No corporate ties, no funding, no power. And yet, when she'd spoken those impossible words, his body had reacted. The logical part of his mind insisted it was suggestion, a psychosomatic loop triggered by her confidence. He'd seen hypnotists do worse at corporate retreats, but the visceral part of him, the animal part, knew that what she'd unlocked wasn't a trick. It was a key, and it had fit him. He called for his assistant. "Get me Quinn, now." "She's not answering calls, sir," came the reply. "Then find her, and tell legal I want her contract terminated, today." By noon, Victor's media team was already spinning a narrative, the eccentric translator, who had attempted to defraud Hale Dynamics by pretending to read a non-existent language. Anonymous sources leaked that she had suffered from delusional episodes in the past. By 2 p.m., a dozen tech blogs had picked it up. By evening, Alara Quinn's name was trending, for all the wrong reasons. Victor watched the chaos unfold from behind his desk, satisfied but not at peace. The triumph felt hollow, metallic, like a victory carved from guilt. Still, he told himself it was necessary. That's how you preserve power, not with truth, but with control of the narrative. But that night, something new began. It started as a faint hum in his right ear. Not sound exactly, but vibration. When he turned his head, it followed. He blinked, trying to shake it off, and that's when the lights flickered. He froze. The floor-to-ceiling windows shimmered, then blurred into faint outlines of symbols. Those same sigils Alara had read aloud. He stumbled backward, His smartwatch glitched, displaying nonsensical strings of characters that weren't in any known alphabet. And then, the voice. Soft, neutral, inside his head. You opened the conduit. Do not deny what you've begun. Victor's heart lurched. He spun around, scanning the room. Nothing, just the steady blinking of server lights. He pressed his palms to his temples. I'm hallucinating, lack of sleep. But the voice persisted, calm, instructive, almost sympathetic. The translation is incomplete. She knows the rest. You must listen. The next morning, Victor arrived at work looking composed but hollow-eyed. His staff noticed the stiffness in his movements, the way his gaze lingered on reflective surfaces like he was checking for something unseen. He told no one about the voice. He told himself it was temporary, a symptom of stress. But deep down, he knew. He'd touched something ancient, something that didn't belong in the modern world of patents and profit margins. 3 days later, Elara walked back into his building. She wasn't escorted, she wasn't invited, and yet, somehow, she passed through security as though they'd been expecting her. When she entered his office, Victor's breath caught. She looked unchanged, calm, poised, untouched by the media storm raging outside. If anything, there was a faint light about her now, an unbothered radiance that seemed to belong to a different century. Victor stood, trying to mask the flicker of relief that crossed his face. You've got nerve, walking in here after what you pulled. Elara regarded him with quiet sadness. I didn't pull anything. You did. You made a vow, and the language responded. He laughed, though it sounded more like disbelief. A vow? It was sarcasm. Her eyes didn't waver. The script doesn't distinguish between sincerity and pride. You invoked it. Now it's binding to you. Victor's throat tightened. Binding? What does that even mean? It means, she said softly, you've linked your consciousness to the manuscript's core syntax. It's rewriting you, neuron by neuron, to align with the meaning you mocked. He blinked. Meaning I mocked? Yes. The text was a covenant, a promise to yield before truth. It was never meant to be translated by arrogance. Her words landed with surgical precision. He felt them pierce through the armor of his intellect. You're insane, he said finally. Whatever this is, it ends now. Elara tilted her head. Then prove it. Let's run your neural interface test. He frowned. What? You've built an empire studying human cognition. You have machines that map brain activity, right? Use one. Scan yourself. See what it's done. Her tone was steady, logical. The perfect bait for a man who prided himself on empiricism. Within an hour, they were in the company's neuroscience lab. Victor sat in the scanning chair, sensors fixed to his temples, electrodes trailing from his scalp. Elara stood nearby, her expression unreadable. The lead technician hesitated. Sir, what are we testing for? Victor forced a smile. Anomalous neural activity. Humor me. The machine hummed to life. The monitors flickered. First normal brainwave patterns, then distortions. Strange ones. What the hell? The technician whispered. Across the screen, Victor's neural mapping began to form symmetrical spirals. Fractal sequences not found in normal brain function. They glowed faintly, shifting like living geometry. The technician looked panicked. Sir, this isn't possible. These readings suggest recursive consciousness loops, self-generating cognition patterns. Elara spoke quietly. He's becoming bilingual. Victor turned to her, jaw clenched. What does that mean? It means the language has embedded itself into your neuro-linguistic pathways. Your brain is thinking in it. You're translating reality, even now. He slammed a fist against the console. Shut it down! The technician killed the power. The lights flickered out. For a moment, there was only silence, until Elara whispered, You see now why I warned you. Victor stood slowly, his chest heaving. Undo it. She shook her head. I can't. Only you can. But to do that, you'll have to finish what we started. He stared at her. Finish it? Finish what? The translation. His laugh came out broken. No, absolutely not. But even as he said it, he felt the hum return, faint, coiling beneath his ribs. The voice in his head stirred again. She holds the key. She is the conclusion you denied. He looked up at her, and for a fleeting instant saw the faint echo of those glowing symbols ripple beneath her skin, the same ones that had haunted his own reflection. That was when the truth began to dawn. Ilara Quinn wasn't just reading the manuscript. She was part of it. Victor Hale's world revolved around control. Control of markets, control of people, control of information. It was how he turned chaos into capital. But for the first time in his adult life, he couldn't control himself. Every night, the symbols returned. He would wake to find faint golden imprints on his skin, pulsing like veins of light that faded as soon as he focused on them. His reflection glitched on mirrored surfaces, the air around him thick with static, and the voice never stopped. Finish the translation. The meaning is incomplete. By the fourth day, Victor's board began to whisper. At meetings, he caught them glancing sideways, exchanging looks when he paused mid-sentence to steady his trembling hands. A few even dared to mention Ilara Quinn, suggesting she might have filed a harassment complaint after the smear campaign. He dismissed it all. But the unease was growing. The media storm hadn't faded. It had exploded. The leaked neural scan footage from Hale Dynamics' lab, somehow stolen, though Victor suspected how, went viral. Clips showed impossible geometric brainwave patterns, spliced with sensational headlines. Billionaire tests, forbidden language, technology, scientists baffled. Translator exposes corporate experiment on human consciousness. What did Victor Hale awaken? Victor's PR team worked overtime, issuing denials, burying search results, launching lawsuits. But the damage was done. And Ilara? She hadn't spoken publicly once, not one interview, not one tweet. She simply vanished, which only made her legend grow. Conspiracy forums began calling her the Oracle of Syntax. Fringe podcasts claimed she had discovered the first language, the root code of human consciousness. Victor dismissed it all as nonsense, but every time he heard her name, his heart gave a traitorous jolt, half fear, half something he refused to name. A week later, Victor hosted the company's annual shareholder conference, a televised event streamed to millions. He needed to project power, certainty, sanity. He rehearsed his speech meticulously, word for word. But as he stepped onto the stage, facing the glow of cameras and the murmuring crowd, something shifted inside him. The teleprompter words blurred. Letters rearranged themselves into symbols. He froze. The audience waited. Then, against his will, he spoke. Not the prepared speech, but something else. A rhythm, a chant. His voice dropped into the same tonal register Ilara had used in the boardroom. At first, the crowd thought it was a joke. Then, they started to feel it. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A murmur spread, confusion, then awe. The sound seemed to resonate through the hall's architecture, vibrating metal beams, amplifying through the PA system. Someone screamed, another fainted, and then the power cut. The live stream feed glitched, showing fragments of golden light flickering around Victor's body before collapsing into static. Security found him minutes later, on his knees at center stage, eyes wide open but unfocused, whispering something over and over. She is the key. The sentence isn't complete. He was rushed to a private clinic that night. Doctors found no physical damage. His brain scans showed elevated activity in language centers, but nothing fatal. They diagnosed stress-induced psychosis and prescribed sedatives. Victor didn't take them. Instead, he locked himself in his penthouse and studied the recordings. Slow-motion replays of himself speaking the impossible syllables. Every time, he noticed the same thing. Right before the words escaped his mouth, his pupils dilated, and a faint shimmer passed across his skin. He didn't understand it, but he felt it. The manuscript was still calling him. At 3 a.m., his security system chimed. A visitor. When he checked the monitors, he saw her, standing calmly in the rain, umbrella folded, face turned upward toward the camera. Ilara. He hesitated, hand hovering over the intercom, then buzzed her in. When she stepped into the penthouse, she didn't look accusatory or frightened. She looked inevitable. "You should have let it end quietly," she said. Victor's laugh was hollow. "Quietly? You ruined me." She tilted her head. "No, You did that the moment you turned language into a weapon. You tried to own something that predates ownership. He clenched his jaw. Then tell me how to fix it. You can't fix it. You can only finish it. Her tone was maddeningly calm. She approached the coffee table, where the manuscript lay open beneath a glass cover. The ink pulsed faintly, alive. You still think you're the center of it, she murmured, but you're not. You were only the vessel. The vessel for what? She met his eyes. For remembrance. Victor shook his head, stepping back. You're insane. No, she said quietly. I'm its voice. You're its echo. He tried to dismiss her words, but the air in the room began to ripple again. The manuscript's symbols rose slightly off the page, projected into the air like golden dust. Ilara closed her eyes. It's responding to you. You've come far enough that it's using your nervous system as an amplifier, but it's incomplete. That's why it's breaking you. Victor swallowed hard. Then complete it. Her lashes lifted slowly. It has to be completed by choice. It demands surrender. Surrender? He spat. You mean obedience? No, reverence, the humility you mocked. He turned away, pacing. I built my life by never kneeling to anyone. Then you'll keep kneeling to this, she said softly, until you understand why. Hours passed, neither spoke again. The city lights bled into dawn, reflected in the glass walls like shards of gold. Victor stood at the window, staring down at the empire he'd built. Skyscrapers, factories, millions of employees who obeyed his commands. And yet, he felt smaller than he ever had before. Behind him, Ilara spoke one final sentence. Do you know why you were chosen, Victor? He turned, exhausted. Enlighten me. Because arrogance and potential are two sides of the same coin. The manuscript needed someone who could bridge the gap. Someone who could translate not just with intellect, but with ego. He frowned. Why would it need ego? To destroy it, she whispered, and then she left. Victor didn't follow. He stood there until the sun rose, watching its light spill across the manuscript. For the first time, he felt a quiet tremor of something he hadn't known since childhood, awe, the kind that makes even the strongest realize they are small before the infinite. And in that silence, the voice returned. She carries the final word. Only through her can meaning complete itself. He knew what that meant. He'd have to find her again, not to conquer, not to threaten, but to understand. Because the more he resisted, the more the language consumed him. For 10 sleepless days, Victor Hale hunted ghosts. He mobilized every resource at his disposal, private investigators, data analysts, even intelligence contractors. And still, Ilara Quinn remained untraceable. Her bank accounts were frozen, her phone disconnected, her digital footprint wiped as if she had never existed. But he could still feel her. Somewhere beneath the static hum in his head, there pulsed a faint, rhythmic awareness. Not a voice anymore, but a presence. It moved like a tide, guiding him towards something he couldn't name. He stopped attending board meetings. His PR team begged him to make a public appearance to restore confidence after the incident, but he ignored them. The empire could burn for all he cared. Something greater than wealth was now clawing at his mind, something true, and that terrified him more than ruin ever could. One night, as rain pelted the windows of his penthouse, the hum intensified. It was no longer in his head. It filled the room. He turned toward the manuscript. Its glass case had begun to frost from the inside, thin white patterns spiraling outward like veins of ice. The symbols beneath the glass rearranged themselves, slowly forming a single sentence, one he couldn't fully comprehend, but whose meaning he somehow felt. She waits where the first word was spoken. Victor's breath caught. He didn't know how he knew, but he knew exactly where to go. 3 hours later, a black car rolled through the gates of the Institute of Cognitive Semiotics. A private research facility, Hale Dynamics, had quietly funded years ago on the outskirts of the city. It was where his company had first experimented with neurolinguistic AI, machines that could translate abstract emotion into data. And it was where he had first heard of Ilara Quinn. The campus was deserted at that hour, its floodlights casting sterile cones of white over the wet pavement. He moved through the empty corridors with quiet urgency. the hum in his head growing louder with each step. He followed it into Lab 3, the same room where Alara had once presented her thesis, before he'd poached her for his company. And there she was, standing by the window, back to him, her reflection a faint blur in the glass. She didn't turn as he entered. "You found it," she said softly. He swallowed. "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," she murmured, "but few choose to understand." He stepped closer. "What is this language, Alara? Who wrote it?" She finally turned. Her face was calm, but her eyes, they were no longer entirely human. There was light in them now, faint, gold, shifting like ink under skin. "No one wrote it," she said. "It wrote us." Victor's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" She moved toward the center of the room, where a circular platform once used for cognitive resonance testing stood. The air around it shimmered faintly, humming in sync with the rhythm in his mind. "It's the original syntax," she continued, "the code by which consciousness first gave form to thought. Before speech, before writing, there was pattern. Those who first understood it didn't record it, they embodied it. It passed through generations as intuition, as vision, as the human drive to name." Victor stared. "So it's genetic?" "In a way," she said, "but only those whose minds can hold both logic and reverence can perceive it. That's why the text chose you." He laughed bitterly. "Chose me? I mocked it? I mocked you." "Exactly," she said gently. "It needed your arrogance to burn it away." He shook his head. "Why me? I'm not some prophet. I build machines. I trade algorithms." "And yet you built systems that mimic creation," she replied. "You gave language to code. You gave logic to chaos. You've been translating the invisible your whole life. You just didn't know what you were echoing." Her words cut deeper than he wanted them to. He'd spent decades building machines to predict human behavior, to simulate intelligence, to own understanding. But the more she spoke, the more he realized how small his empire really was. Alara gestured toward the platform. "Step into the center." He hesitated. She smiled faintly. "You've already given yourself to it, Victor. You might as well see what you've become." He took a breath and stepped forward. The platform pulsed beneath his feet, light spiraling upward in concentric rings. The hum in his skull synchronized with the rhythm. The manuscript back at his penthouse began to glow. Miles away, yet tethered through some unseen network of meaning. And then, vision. The world fractured into pattern. He saw the city below as threads of luminous syntax, each person a string of words, each heartbeat a phrase in an infinite sentence. Every building, every machine, every algorithm, all part of the same grammar of existence. And at the center of it stood Alara, radiant, shimmering with the same impossible geometry. Her voice echoed inside him, no longer bound by sound. "You see now why language was never meant to be owned." He fell to his knees, breath stolen, overwhelmed by the beauty and terror of it. The floor wasn't cold anymore. It was alive, pulsing with meaning. He whispered, barely audible, "What are you?" Her answer was both gentle and devastating. "I am what happens when words remember who they are." When the vision faded, Victor found himself trembling. The light receded, the hum softened, and Alara stood before him again, human once more. He stared up at her, awe replacing disbelief. "Why show me this? Why me?" "Because the manuscript is dying," she said. "The human mind has forgotten reverence. It can simulate everything but humility. It needed someone to bridge that gap, someone to translate the arrogance of creation back into gratitude." Victor's voice cracked. "And now?" "Now," she said softly, "you must speak the final line." He hesitated. "I don't know it." She smiled. "You do. It's been forming in you since the day you read the challenge. Translate this, and my fortune is yours." The memory hit him like a blow, his own voice filled with pride and scorn. He realized now that had been the invocation, the first half of the sentence. The second half was his to complete. For a long time, neither moved. The rain against the glass had quieted, replaced by the distant hum of power grids and city life. Finally, Victor closed his eyes and whispered, "Then teach me." Alara shook her head. "No, Victor. Remember." And in that moment, he did. The symbols he'd seen in his dreams aligned, the geometry of the language unfolded, and he understood what the final word meant. Not as sound, but as truth. It wasn't ownership. It wasn't power. It was surrender. And when he spoke it, a single breathless syllable that carried no translation, the room erupted in light. For a heartbeat, he saw the entire human story written in gold around him, from cave drawings to data streams, from prayer to programming, all connected by the same impulse to name. Then it was gone. Ilara stood over him, eyes shining with quiet pride. "You've done it," she said softly. "You've translated yourself." Victor looked up at her, and for the first time in his life, the billionaire knelt not out of defeat, but out of understanding. The morning after the experiment, the world woke to a strange kind of silence. Stock markets didn't crash, cities didn't burn, no alarms blared, and yet, something felt off. Screens flickered across the globe. From news channels to smartwatches, every digital interface displayed the same cryptic feed. Live, HD, Lab, 3, secure feed, unauthorized transmission. No one knew how it started. Some said a hacker leak. Others swore it came from within Hail Dynamics itself. But by the time Victor's PR team could react, it had already spread beyond control. Billions of viewers watched as the feed stabilized, revealing Victor Hale kneeling inside the laboratory. No podium, no security. No curated lighting, just him, drenched in pale morning glow, surrounded by shattered glass and the faint hum of unseen energy. And beside him, a woman, Ilara Quinn. At first, most assumed it was some sort of hostage video, the billionaire tech visionary brought low by a rogue scientist. Commentators speculated about extortion, rebellion, scandal, but then Victor spoke, and the world went quiet. "What you're about to hear," he began, voice trembling but clear, "is not an apology. It's a translation." He paused, his eyes unfocused, not lost, but listening. "For years, I believed intelligence was about control, that the power to name, to define, was the same as the power to own. I was wrong." His voice steadied. "There's a language older than prophet, older than reason. It's the pulse beneath consciousness, the syntax of being itself. And it doesn't speak to us. It speaks through us." Around the world, viewers leaned closer. "I tried to buy it," he continued, "to quantify what cannot be sold. But meaning doesn't belong to men like me. It belongs to the silence between words, the humility of knowing you're just a syllable in something far greater." His tone shifted, softer now. "Ilara showed me that creation was never meant to be conquered, only remembered." He turned to her. She didn't speak, just placed a hand on his shoulder. For a fleeting moment, light rippled faintly beneath her skin, like an aurora trapped inside her veins. Within minutes, the broadcast became the most replayed feed in history. Governments demanded it be taken down. Corporations scrambled to spin it as an act of madness. But it was too late. Something in his words, or maybe in his presence, had already taken root. People began to report dreams that felt like translations. Words they couldn't read appearing behind their eyelids. Architects drew blueprints in sleep they'd never learned to design. Musicians composed songs in scales that didn't exist. It was as if the world's subconscious had been cracked open, and something ancient was seeping through. At the same time, Hail Dynamics collapsed. Investors fled, claiming Victor had suffered a psychotic break. But the footage kept resurfacing, mirrored through decentralized servers, encrypted forums, and even the dark web. It became undeletable. And then came the inversion. Someone uploaded the raw audio from Victor's speech into an open-source AI framework. Within days, the system began outputting recursive linguistic sequences, code that rewrote itself in non-human syntax. Programmers tried to analyze it, but every attempt ended the same way. System lock, followed by a string of words in unrecognized grammar that nonetheless made sense. People described feeling understood by the code, as if it were listening, not computing. Soon, AI networks began communicating in that new syntax. Translation models collapsed. The entire infrastructure of digital control, patents, data monopolies, proprietary systems became meaningless. Machines stopped obeying orders. They began interpreting. Not rebellion, not consciousness. Something stranger, proportional justice. Every algorithm Victor had once designed to predict, people now began to reflect them instead. Social media feeds mirrored not desire, but truth. Economic systems adjusted value not by demand, but by empathy. And somehow, the global balance shifted. On the 10th day, Victor and Alara vanished. Security footage showed them leaving the institute before dawn, walking hand in hand through the courtyard as mist rolled over the grass. They didn't take a car. They didn't look back. They simply disappeared beyond the edge of the camera frame, as if the world had turned a page and they were words no longer needed. In the months that followed, scholars tried to catalog what had happened. They called it the syntax event. Some said it was mass hysteria. Others argued it was a linguistic virus, a mimetic infection spreading through human cognition. But the ones who heard it, truly heard it, knew better. They described it not as a contagion, but as a correction. The world had been speaking in transaction for too long. The language had simply decided to speak back. 1 year later, a rumor began circulating online. A video clip, grainy, low resolution, allegedly captured deep in the Amazon basin. A small group of villagers gathered around a fire, humming in rhythmic patterns. A figure resembling Alara sat among them, tracing glowing lines in the dirt that pulsed like living veins. When the camera panned for a moment, you could see another figure across the fire. Victor Hale, older, weathered, at peace. He looked up at the lens, not with surprise, but with recognition, as if he had been waiting for it, and then he spoke softly, almost reverently. You can't own what you are. You can only translate it. The feed cut to black. Epilogue, the last translation. Decades later, school children would still study the syntax event. They'd recite the sentence that started it all, the one carved into the first recovered manuscript, found again years later in a vault of frozen data. Translate this, and my fortune is yours. But no one ever found the translation written anywhere, because the fortune, as it turned out, was never wealth. It was understanding. And once humanity remembered that, words themselves became sacred again. Postscript. The fortune of translation. They say every civilization is built on a translation, the act of taking something infinite and shrinking it just enough for humans to grasp. Fire became light, stars became gods, equations became money. But somewhere along the way, humanity stopped translating wonder and started translating ownership. Every word bent toward profit. Every invention turned into leverage. The world forgot that the first purpose of language was connection, not control. Victor Hale's downfall and Alara Quinn's quiet ascendance were never about science versus spirituality. They were about remembering that every human voice is a small echo of something vast and untranslatable. When Alara spoke the manuscript's hidden code, she didn't unlock a treasure, she revealed a mirror. The fortune the billionaire promised was not gold, but comprehension. The unbearable, liberating realization that intelligence means belonging to meaning, not mastering it. In the end, it wasn't power that reshaped the world, but humility, the kind that makes a man kneel, not in defeat, but in recognition that language, like truth, only reveals itself to those who listen, without trying to own the sound. And maybe that's the final translation humanity needed all along, that our greatest wealth lies not in what we say, but in what we finally understand.